You're listening to Almost Famous with Jim Francis Meza, only on LA Talk Radio.
Well, and we're off to the races, like I normally say. How is everyone this evening? As I understand, they were supposed to have a tsunami of water. Perhaps it's supposed to rain cats and dogs, or a monsoon is coming upon us. Who knows? But at any rate, I am super stoked and delighted and super happy to be here with you guys tonight. My next guest, she's a wonderful friend of mine. She's great. She's a voiceover for Selena. She does Selena Gomez's voice of Madonna and the voice of Taylor Swift in the popular web cartoon Hyena House Brawl. She's the voice of Sally, Acorn, and Nami in the popular web cartoon Hookups. Her name is synonymous with coolness. I like her and her hubby as well. You guys, she's been also on Clickbait, and she plays Emma. If you haven't seen that movie already, you are living under a rock. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you my good friend and actress and voiceover and comedian, Brandy Aguilar.
Hello. Thanks for having me on, Jim. And I brought a special guest. This is Buffy, my dog, and I love her more than anything.
Horrible. Is it real? Or is it? Because I don't know when you're joking.
You know, last time I checked, she is real. She has a heartbeat. Okay. She does have a pulse. And for everybody watching, I decided to do this interview in my PJs tonight.
Wonderful. So
I was like, I'm gonna be comfortable, makeup free, and in my PJs. And Buffy wanted to be on camera too. Oh my goodness, she is. She's a little bit hyper right now.
I bet, and so am I. I'm firing all cylinders this afternoon. Oh my God, there she is. She's quite adorable. We have a baby pug. We have a new addition to our family. We have a baby pug.
What's his name?
Isky, and we have, Buddha, our black pug, as well as another pug that lives in another house. That obviously, he'll remain nameless because his name is it's a little inappropriate.
Is it inappropriate?
Yeah.
not family friendly.
No. But I'm super excited because, quite frankly, it's been a while.
Has been, oh my goodness, it's been so long because I moved to Florida. I got a dog.
I thought you were roaming around. I was under the impression, because you were in Florida. Okay, Brandy, listen up. I was under the impression that you had gotten an alligator for a pet.
I may have. I'm full of surprises. It's funny because there's a big ad by our apartment that's for a gator farm, and it's the most Florida thing ever. And then there's Buffy, are you okay?
Gatorland, right? Gatorland.
I think it is called Gatorland. Yes, and so it's that's really funny. And then obviously like flamingos and beaches everywhere, which I love because I'm a beach girl, born and raised in California. So you got to have the beach. And we live very close to the beach. So we could go to the beach at any time. It's nice. And it feels in a lot of ways like California because of the fact Florida is similar to California in a lot of ways because of the beaches. A lot of, the same weather patterns kind of, but I would say Florida is a lot more humid. And Buffy, are you okay? She is so hyper. I'm so sorry.
She is funky. Did she take your drugs, your crack perhaps?
She did. She did. She's a little attention hog. She loves people. She's totally the opposite of my Chihuahua. May she rest in peace. I loved her to death also. But as you know, Chihuahuas hate everybody. Buffy, because she's a toy poodle, poodles in general are very friendly. And it's just kind of in their genes to be like, they love everybody, whereas chihuahuas hate everyone. So, but Buffy loves people. She loves to be pet. She loves to be kissed. Yeah, look at
Brandy. So how's my boy Steven? Where do you have him? What is he in your dungeon?
Great. Steven is great. I told him. I was telling him that he needs to do a podcast interview with you because Steven is really good on the camera.
He's fantastic.
He does his own, podcast thing as well. And he
did a show with me. He had me in one of the episodes. I was sort of loaded that day. So he goes, funny enough, I am too. So both of us were like kind of our own headspace of sorts. It was just funny. Like,
he's great.
I like him a lot.
It's cool because he is really branching off with his sports podcast. Steven loves sports. All he talks about is like college football and boxing. So my boyfriend is a huge jock, which is really funny because I'm not really into sports that much. I'm more of like a theater weirdo kind of art freak. So it balances out, but I've always found myself very attracted to jocks in general. So it's a good like balance, but he appreciates, the podcasting too. And he interviews like a lot of cool boxers on his podcast. So I'm pretty excited for him.
Yeah, it's taken off. I noticed. And we're supposed to, when you guys come out here, we gotta hang out at some point. You guys gotta see my new gigs. We got new gigs.
We do. The cool thing is that my entire family is in California. So I say I moved to Florida, but technically I go back and forth between Florida and California anyways. So my family, like every time I go to California, it's easy because my family's there. So we just stay there. It's it was just me.
Santa Clarita, born
and raised in Santa Clarita, 661.
So, let me ask you this. Does that make you a Valley girl at all or not?
I think it does. It's funny you mentioned that because Steven, when he first met me, said that I had like a Valley girl accent. And I said that he had a Southern accent. So I've been told by people like from other countries that I sound very Californian. But I did have a person once say that I sounded like I was from New York. And I'm like,
no.
Really? I mean, I love New York, but I don't hear the New York accent in me personally.
No.
I definitely
No, you're a Valley girl 150%.
Valley girl, yes.
I can hear the moon zappa in you. It's like totally.
Like totally, for sure. I love
like
that.
It's like, what is it, Trippendicular or something?
So there's actually, because I love everything retro, I was watching an old news segment from 1982, and it was when that song first came out, the Valley Girl song, and they were interviewing all these teenage girls from the San Fernando Valley, and they were like, so is this the cool way to talk? And teach us how to talk Valley Girl. And I geeked out because I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was alive at that time so I could have been like around for the peak of the Valley Girl.
Right. I know, me too. Isn't it weird? Like in some respects, we're like, I don't think we ever left the 80s because everyone's like either that or like we're just time travelers. Because everyone I notice, like every time I talk to folks are always making references to the 80s.
They do.
I was very little in the 80s. I mean, fun fact, I was born in the late 70s. So during Jimmy Carter, God rest his soul's, hence the Jimmy era. And so I was named Jimmy after Jimmy Carter. And we call it, most of my friends, they call me Jimmy. And of course, you'll eventually call me Jimmy. But Jim works just as fine because that's my creative name. Jim. So the Valley is super like distinctive in its it's got this distinctive like quality to it that I gotta say only those that know about the Valley know, and
they do. And there's my favorite parts of the Valley. I love the creative hubs of like the valley, like Studio City or Encino,
Right.
Sherman Oaks. I love Sherman Oaks.
Right. And
But
most a
you
lot of
know,
yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. Oh,
I was just
sorry. I
gonna
was
say,
just gonna
go ahead.
say that I don't miss LA. I think I
You
love
out
Northern California.
you outgrew it.
I think you know what? I got bored
Yeah,
of it.
yeah, me too.
I think that's the truth. I've seen it all in
Right.
LA. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to be in LA, but when you're born and raised there, it's a different experience. At least for me, it was.
I
Because
second that emotion. I second that
yes,
emotion for sure.
yes, it's like a bubble. And in 2018, I went to and you probably have seen my post. I went to England,
Yeah.
and I remember on the plane ride back home to LA, I was feeling really depressed going back to LA.
Yeah.
And I was like, everybody in the world wants to be in LA, but there's so much beauty out there in the world that I have not seen.
Yeah.
Um,
Who knows? You might get
you know,
deported in Mexico because you're a Brandy Aguilar. You might end
are
up.
we both going to get deported?
Yeah, I think I want to go to Cancun though. I'm gonna tell drop me off down here.
It was funny. I went to Mexico. The last time I went to Mexico was actually Cabo. Oh, it was gorgeous, very
Beautiful.
humid. But it was so beautiful. If you've ever been to Cabo before, they have those like rock arches. And I went outside because it was for my grandma's birthday. She wanted to do a cruise. And so we went outside, and when the cruise ship docked, Buffy, she's so hyper. It was gorgeous. The sky was the bluest I've ever seen it, and the ocean so blue. It was
What about the water?
absolutely
Lukewarm water, right? It's lukewarm.
Oh yes, very humid. Even in October, it was so humid. I was like, oh yeah,
Most of Mexico is humid, by the way.
It's very humid, and I was like, I'm gonna go put my bathing suit on. I can imagine because my all four of my grandparents spoke Spanish. My one grandma, she was from like way down in Mexico, like very
down south.
Very down south. And it's very inland also. So when I was researching like, my family tree on Ancestry, I was shocked by how like inland it was, because I was thinking, God, it probably like in the summertime, it probably gets so hot and humid there. So yeah.
I don't like mugginess. Like, I know we're gonna go visit you guys at some point, but I don't know. It takes, I guess it's something it takes getting used to, I would imagine. Like
it does. And Florida can be the same way when, in the summertime. It's
right.
Buffy.
How long have you been over there now? Would you say a year or two?
Since last May, since May of 2024 officially.
Okay.
And
Brandy.
yeah, what's that?
You're a transplant. You transplanted from.
I know. Well, it's funny because like a lot of people in Florida, and I hear this in like Texas and Arizona, they get mad when Californians move to their state because they're like, oh, you guys are crowding up our state. And I'm like, but I promise I'm nice. I'm super chill. I think I mean, I get along with everybody as far as I know. I don't have any enemies as far as I know. I'm super chill. I won't cause any drama. I might play some 80s music really loud at night, but if you can handle that, we'll be great. But
hey, let me ask you this. You have such a huge presence on TikTok. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. TikTok is so much fun. When I thought it was going to get banned, I was preparing to,
it went black for a while, it went dark.
That wasn't that like so weird. And then like the next day, it's like,
world.
oh, we're back. And I'm like, oh, okay, moving on. But you have a TikTok presence as well, and a big Instagram presence. So congratulations. Yeah. And you're on LA Talk Radio. I mean,
yeah, it's great.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah, I'm an LA Talk Radio. I just recently did research of my own. It's been a year or so. or more, maybe a year and a half. And it turns out through my dad's lineage, we're related to Maria Felix, who was like from the golden age Mexico. She was
Oh
an
wow,
icon in Mexico. Yeah. So that's
that's
really
cool.
cool. Yeah. So I
That's
found out some
cool.
of the family members knew her, and she's like the equivalent of what Elizabeth Taylor. She was like a Mexico's darling of the 1950s, 40s, and
That is so
probably
cool.
40s.
So was she like famous in like the golden age of Mexican
Yeah,
cinema?
right.
That's
Mexican
cool.
cinema. Yeah. It's
That
pretty,
is so.
pretty
What's her
rad,
name?
right? And Maria
That is
Felix.
cool.
Yeah. Maria
That's
Felix.
so cool.
She's fantastic. She's such a good-looking lady back in the day. I mean, she was just in her heyday. I mean, weren't we all?
Everybody in like the 40s and 50s, like the women,
Yeah.
I just love that style, and I dress that way
Yeah.
as much as I can because I'm really into the pinup thing.
Oh,
But
yeah, right.
like that, when I think of like ideal beauty, I think of how women dressed in like the 40s and 50s. They just
Okay.
that pinup look just looks
Yeah.
so good on everybody. It's just such a timeless look, and everybody just looks so fabulous.
So do you
And
like the John Wick like films, the dark sort of noir that kind of like it kind of encapsulates the and embodies that some of the ladies in that, right? You know, like the
it
operators have like
does.
the greaser pinup look from the 1950s. I thought that was cool with tattoos though, running down their
Oh,
arms.
I
It's
love.
pretty rad.
So I am too much of a coward to get tattoos, but I
Mm.
love tattoo art. Like I always say, if I were to get a tattoo, I think I'd get a small tattoo on my wrist of Paul Lynde from the show Bewitched when he was Uncle
Okay.
Arthur.
Yeah.
Paul Lynde is one of my absolute favorite comedians, and Steven loves him as well.
Mhm.
I don't know if you know who Paul Lynde is. He was very famous in like the 60s and 70s, and he was on Hollywood Squares.
Oh yeah, sure.
Very, very funny guy.
Mhm.
And he died, way too young. He was only 55 when he died.
Holy shit.
But if you ever get a chance, look him up because he is so funny. Like,
Yeah.
just such a funny guy.
Yeah, I thought my girl brought him up the other night, and we're talking about celebrities from the 60s, and Hollywood Squares came up. And hey, guess what? Speaking of the 80s, Dada, the guy that plays Dada, he won. He has a star in the Walk of Fame, Hollywood, and it was a
Ooh.
reunion of sorts with the Goonies.
Ooh, that's cool.
So it's a
That's
total
cool.
reunion. It's
Goonies
rad.
Never Say Die. Oh my gosh, that's such an
Yeah.
iconic movie. So many iconic 80s movies.
Yeah, I always make reference to the 80s when I'm talking to a person like you, because having known you as long as I have, you were on my Juicy Divas Confessions of a Limo Driver, you were on Jim and James Morning Podcast, and now you are on Almost Famous.
I feel like a Jim Francis Meza veteran at this point.
Yeah, you are. You're an OG. You're an OG.
I know, right? I feel like a Jim Francis Meza OG. Original gangsta.
Hey, listen, the last time we had eaten those tacos at Peachy's Tacos on Hollywood.
Oh my God.
Weren't you whizzing around the room?
Yes. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this.
No.
Was it just me, or were the tacos not the best? Like, they were good, but there was.
That's why it's called fucking tacos.
Yeah, exactly. I love the taco trucks in LA, like the authentic Mexican food. Unfortunately, in Florida, there's not as large of a Mexican population in Florida. The most Latinos here are Puerto Rican and Cuban, which has been really cool because I get to try out Cuban restaurants.
I love
Cuban food is so good. I had this Cuban rice dish that was incredible. And it was,
what were the ingredients, do you think? What did you taste?
It was a lot of vegetables because I got the veggie plate.
Okay.
And so it was a veggie rice dish. So it was a lot of peas, carrots, corn, every vegetable you can think of, and it was delicious. It was this little Cuban restaurant in Orlando.
The people
So
talking, hey, Mom, come on in. How you doing?
It's cool. It's really, really cool. And I've always had, I think, the top 3 Latin countries I've always wanted to go to are Cuba, Argentina, and Costa Rica. So I really want to go to those countries and like visit for like a vacation. Yeah. So one day it'll happen. In Costa Rica, they also have this really cool sloth sanctuary that I really want to go to. Yes, and
I have to tell Steven about that.
I know. Steven, I know. Valentine's Day is coming up. So right. I joke and I'm like, let's just go to Costa Rica to like the sloth sanctuary. That would be very expensive. So we probably have to save up for that. But you can see my little Jim Morrison sign in the background.
Yeah. Break on through to the other side.
It's him lighting up a blunt. Like, isn't that badass that we have him? A picture of him lighting up a freaking blunt.
I think that's worth money because I've never seen any. Honest to God, truth, I've never seen that picture anywhere. So it's got to be worth some money.
I got it at where did I get it? I think I got it at a gift shop in Memphis when I went to Memphis for a theater festival I was performing in. And they actually had a bunch of them. So I think it's just like a reproduction of the original picture. But it's still really cool. And Jim Morrison was like one of my first crushes. So I was like, I have to get it. And we live
you had a crush on a lot of artists that were dead.
Yeah, I guess I have a thing for dead guys. And what's odd,
the good thing is they're all stiff.
They're a little stiff, but well, I have, I think, I have crushes on a lot of men celebrities that are still alive. But
like Steven.
Steven, definitely. I had a crush. Let's see, a lot of people, because I think I'm definitely attracted to conventionally attractive men, but also men that can make me laugh. So like I've always had a crush on like Andy Kaufman. Yeah. And then I've always had a crush on like Norm Macdonald. He passed away a few years ago, but I always had like a giant ass crush on him. Giant. Yes, Steven's a huge fan of him too. I always had a crush on
good comedy.
He's so funny. And I had a crush on like young Billy Crystal. So so I've noticed that a lot of my crushes were on comedians.
So but it's funny because I mean to cut you off, but Billy Crystal was just on what was it, like one of the fundraisers they had for the fire. It was the fire aid. And then he was because his house burned down.
I know, that was so sad. It was funny. I didn't know he had a house in the Pacific Palisades. For some reason, I thought he lived in like New York because he has a very like New Yorker vibe, energy, so to speak. Right. Maybe he does. Maybe it's just one of his houses in the Pacific Palisades. I'm just glad he's okay.
So I want you to tell the story because it's noteworthy, and I think it's obviously, like for us to really talk about this. Why don't you regale a little bit how Steven swept you off your feet, but most importantly, how he tracked you down, or how he was stalking you. how did this all come about? I want you to tell me because it's great. Every time I hear it, it never gets old.
Right. So he was actually it was definitely unexpected, and I think a lot of times you find your right person for you when you're not looking. Steven is pretty much my first real relationship. I'd never really been in a relationship before Steven. So how we met was it was funny. We met in 2020 in the midst of the COVID fiasco, which I cannot believe is already 5 years ago. But he actually reached out to me. Right? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. He reached out to me. Yes, insane. He reached out to me on Instagram, and he was like, he just slid in my DMs, and he was, very professional. He was like, "Hey, I came across your Instagram. I have a podcast, where I interview artists of all kinds of creative backgrounds, and I'd love to have you on the podcast. So, write me back if you're interested in being interviewed on the podcast." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that would be super cool. Sounds like a lot of fun. I'd be down to do it." And we planned a day for the interview, and it was over like the phone. So it wasn't like this where it was webcam. It was, over the phone. And what's funny is that at the time that Steven reached out to me, I looked at his Instagram, and he didn't have any pictures of himself. So I didn't know what he looked like. And, so when he asked to be—
How intriguing is that, right?
I know, right? So, but I hadn't heard his voice, so I didn't think anything of it. I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. I'd love to be on your podcast. I wasn't, I didn't think more of it, or gave it a second thought or anything. So then when we finally did do the podcast, I heard his voice, and I'm like, oh, this is a very young guy, like around my age. I wonder what he looks like. So then I actually stalked his so it was me that was a stalker, essentially. I looked I went to the very beginning of his Instagram, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's cute. I'm gonna is he single? So I kind of did some snooping around, and I was like, okay, I think he's single because I don't see any girls on his Instagram. So it's like our DMs after the podcast started turning flirtatious. And then it just went off from there. And we actually talked and FaceTimed for about 8 months before he came out to California we met in college. So we wanted to meet up in California, but then his flight got canceled. So then he decided to save up money to finally meet me in Colorado. And we decided to meet in Colorado because it was in the middle of both of us, because he is from Virginia and I'm from California. And so we were like, I think Colorado would be a nice state to kind of meet up in, especially because I have cousins that live in Colorado, so I could stay at their place. And he got an Airbnb in Colorado. And it was odd because I had not even brought up the fact that I was trying to go to Colorado to meet Steven in person for the first time. And my dad just out of nowhere was like, Brandy, do you want to do a 5-day little vacation, with the family in Colorado? And I thought that was so weird because I had not told my dad or my mom about, my plans of potentially meeting Steven for the first time in person in Colorado. So it was almost like it was meant to be, the universe was bringing us together. And yeah, so I know. It's crazy, right? And we ended up meeting.
Wow.
It's crazy. And we ended up meeting in person, definitely hit it off.
But
And
he told me there's that tidbit that you're leaving out. He told me he was a huge fan of your commercial, the Lego My
yes. So, yes. So it was funny because he found out that, I did the child acting thing back in the day. And he was like, I remember seeing you on TV. And he was like, it was funny because he was like, I had a crush on you when I was 8 years old. And I'm like, that is so funny.
And such a great story. It was worth telling. For real.
Isn't that funny.
I love
I
it.
just thought that was hilarious. And
I watched. I remember like you had at some point a clip of the commercial, and I was like, oh my god, he took it back. Like I remember that commercial. I remember watching commercials. We lived for that. There was only so many channels that we had in the 80s and early 90s, and we were stuck. We were glued to the set. That was during the time we used a pot or got something to eat real quick, and then you watch the commercials, and it would be the same commercials because a lot of times those were the ones sponsoring the show, So that was
good
cool.
times. I miss seeing commercials on like an actual TV because now you see them just like online.
Right.
And they still air on TV, but it's like there's a certain nostalgia about seeing a commercial on TV versus seeing it on, the internet. Like it's weird that today's kids they see commercials more online, I would think, than on an actual
and it's
TV.
a fleeting moment. They're like
It is.
like 15 seconds.
And a lot of times you can just skip over the commercials. Sometimes you can't, but when I get the chance, I do skip over the commercials. But then I'm like, but they're my fellow actors, so I want them to get their residuals.
That's so true.
I want them to get their residuals and get paid.
And you're like, hey, there goes your $30, fucker.
Yeah. But Steven is the most amazing man I've ever met. Totally different vibe from, LA guys, because I think I tell him this, I'm like, you have a totally different vibe than a guy from California. I mean, and there probably are good guys in California, but I never ran into them or they're taken. And I'm not going to go after a taken guy, obviously. No. But, I think there's a certain energy, especially in LA, where the city is just so fast paced. And I think people who try to date, because I hear this is an issue in New York City also, that New York City is a horrible place to date in because it's so fast paced. It's pretty expensive.
I think they just cut to the chase. Like, listen, let's just get in the sack and that's it. Like, try each other.
A lot of the dating app culture too is, it just seemed like all the guys I tried to date in LA, they just wanted to hook up, and when I wouldn't hook up with them on the first date, they'd lose interest. And I mean, which is fine. I'm not going to go for a guy that just wants to, hit it and quit it, but I wouldn't even.
Right.
I'm not comfortable with sleeping with a guy I just met. I don't know who he is. I don't know who, what he's capable of. I don't know where he's been,
Brandy, let's switch gears for the sake of time. Listen, I wanted to ask you, like, what first drew you? Because clearly you're a child actress. So what drew you to do, to actually take it serious and dive both feet into acting later in life after, because you did the theater, you did the commercials, your parents were extremely involved. But then when you got a little older, you didn't decide to do anything other than acting, or what was the deal?
Yeah. So I would say I was pretty serious about it from the beginning when I was a kid. I just knew it was what I wanted to do. I was 9 years old and I was like, Mom and Dad, this is like what I want to do. I want to act. And my parents were a little hesitant about it at first. My dad's friends at work were like, oh no, don't get Brandy into acting. They destroy kids. But I had a really good experience with it, personally, me, but I also don't want to invalidate like other child actors' experiences.
Right. Everyone has their own journey, right?
Yeah. And personally for me, it was great. I, started out when I was 10, I modeled for Steinmart and then the commercials and then lots of theater in LA that I did. And I just knew I was going to do it for the rest of my life. And but things changed when I turned 18 because, when you're 18, you're responsible for yourself. So
reality sets in.
Yeah. So it was kind of like I wasn't really protected by, the school thing anymore. I had to figure out, what am I going to do? Like, basically, I wanted to go to college. I was like, I want to go to college because we don't know when I'm going to get my next acting job. And
Right.
I personally did not want to wait tables, and no shame to any actor out there that waits tables in between acting jobs. Totally fine if it works for them, but it wasn't for me. I was like, and I've never waited tables before, which I'm pretty grateful for, only because I would not be able to deal with customers being rude to me. And it's why I'm always super nice to waiters.
And you're so sweet. I couldn't imagine such things happening.
I couldn't be mean to a waiter. I feel so bad because I don't know. I just believe customer service, you should always be nice to customer service.
Yeah.
They are not any less than you. And I am no better, than anybody. I want to be nice to them. And, they work hard. A lot of them are just trying to make a living. But I knew for me, I would not be able to deal with rude customers at a restaurant. So I was like, I'm going to go to college, and it was hard. It was very hard. I was juggling acting and college. And there were many times where I wanted to quit because college is hard. I got my BA in speech communication and rhetoric. It was hard. There were a lot of nights where I had full-blown panic attacks because I'm like, I can't do this. It's so hard. And when you get a degree in something like communication, it requires you to write a lot of like 15 to 20 page.
A lot of paper. Yeah.
Yes. And it's hard because they're research papers, and it has to be done in like a certain way. You have to cite all of your sources, and you have to do it the right way. It's not easy. And so anybody that's watching this right now and in college and having a hard time, keep going. Don't give up. Like, because there were so many times that I wanted to give up, and it's not easy. It's so hard.
Not for the faint-hearted.
It's not. But I wanted to have the degree in my, to support me in between acting jobs, because I wanted to make money in between acting jobs and not have to financially struggle. I am not rich. I am far from rich. And I never want to like pretend that I'm like super wealthy. I live in an apartment, but I'm fine with that. I've never been the type of person that like wants to have like a lavish mansion or
but you grew up in a nice house. Your house wasn't no quaint little place. You had a nice,
my parents worked very hard. They did not have a big wedding. Because my mom says that my dad was like saving so much money for a house. And back then when they, bought the house that I, was raised in, things were cheaper. And I think, it was a little bit easier. Now it's like near impossible to like get a house in LA. Well, is Santa Clarita, I know it's LA County, but I don't know if people consider it LA.
No, not really. I mean, for us, we get it, but most people won't get it. They won't say, like, that's not LA, it's like a suburb or whatever.
It's a suburb, stuck in the suburbs. Well,
the burbs. Remember the burbs?
The burbs, yes. And it's funny because they're like, a lot of people that live in LA, they are always like, oh my God, you live so far from LA. You must have driven so far to get here. And I'm like, actually not really. It only takes about 30 minutes. Now, if I lived in like Bakersfield, yes, that's far. Even Palmdale, like there were people straight up from like Palmdale that, drive to LA for work.
It's like an hour and a half just to get down there.
And then traffic makes it so much
It's
work.
a gridlock. It's just impossible to get down to down the 14th because everyone and their mother, it's like a one way in, one way out situation to get to and from Palmdale and Lancaster for that matter. So
it's
you get bottlenecked in there, and it's like, you know what I mean? Like you could do lunch, fucking breakfast, lunch, and dinner in your car, and you'll still be stuck in traffic. Well, I have to tell you that our time is cut like pretty short tonight.
This was so much
there
fun.
Was so much, I know we got to cover so much ground, but I definitely think that we could do part 2 at some point. In fact, maybe even next week we could come back for part 2 of this wonderful. We didn't even scratch the surface. I mean, because there's the acting, there's the voiceovers, there's all the voices that you do on TikTok. There's all the great stuff, the pictures, the print, the comedy strips that you do. I mean, it's hysterical. It's funny.
So much fun. You got to be in one of my skits someday.
Okay.
You would be so good.
I'm down. I'm totally down. I know we talked about this. We rehashed this like a million times, but it just hasn't happened yet. I'm wondering when.
I know. Next time I'm in LA. So me and Steven want to come to LA. We're going to try to come to LA in like late February, early March. All right.
Cool.
So we will.
That's during my birthday. We got to do a birthday weekend.
Happy birthday. Are you a Pisces?
Early birthday. I'm a Pisces.
Yeah. Nice. I'm a Gemini. So
we're definitely going to have to celebrate with my wife and you get to meet the puppies, the large family we have. My dad.
Yes. Your wife is such a sweetheart. I loved talking with her. She's fantastic. She's awesome.
Because we had such a great time when you came to our podcast, the other podcast.
So much fun.
And yeah, it was the greatest ever. And they were supposed to be on that show. Let's not forget the prank. The prank tanker.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that would have been so funny. I'm sad that they didn't like the idea. Like I was like, that would have been so funny. Like, and if they didn't like it, they could have helped you like come up with another idea. Like,
well, we had such a great idea, but I think they were going for something completely different, and the time frame and all that just didn't coincide. So we said, right, didn't coincide. We'll forget it next time, perhaps, and we'll just try another time. But that's our time. Brandon, I just want to thank you. What are your social media handles so the people that are watching now can follow you or stalk you?
Yes, if you would like to stalk my every move and just be creep on my stuff. My Instagram is X_Brandy Aguilar. And Brandy is spelled with an I. My TikTok is just Brandy_Aguilar. My Twitter, well, I guess it's called X now, is Brandy Aguilar. And I put the stupidest stuff on my Twitter. I just put like random things that nobody cares about because it's just, I have to get my random thoughts out somewhere.
Right.
I'd be like, I just love my dog
so much. It's a stream of consciousness, and that's where you let it out.
Yes.
At the end of the day, life is just a bunch of malarkey.
It really is. It really is. And I just,
any closing thoughts? 1 minute.
Oh, okay. Closing thoughts. Oh my goodness. Everybody should listen to the 80s death metal band Possessed. They're called Possessed, and they are so good. If you're into like death metal, also the death metal band, 80s death metal band called Death. They're literally called Death. They're also really good, and you should listen to them if you're into metal. Guys.
Brandy Aguilar, ladies and gentlemen, that's my show.
Yay!
You're listening to Almost Famous with Jim Francis Meza, only on LA Talk Radio.